Hi, everyone. This is Mara Salerno, the Gutsy Health Coach, and here we are on our Thursday live stream. And today we're going to be covering all about digestive anatomy. What happens in the digestive process. I actually started this last week a bit in the acid reflux live stream that I did, but I really wanted to review some of those elements from the mouth to the esophagus to the stomach, and then take you all down the pipeline with the small intestine, the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas, and just talk very briefly about the large intestine. So for those of you either who know me or don't know me, again, I am Mara Salerno. I am a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, and I help people just like you resolve their chronic digestive conditions so they can get free of pain and dread of the toilet using natural and holistic and functional medicine strategies to help you resolve all those issues. So that is what I do, and I love what I do, and I love seeing people get better. So I welcome all of you again for coming today. And I really encourage you to really pay attention to this live stream. Feel free to watch it again. All of these live streams are available for replay always inside the group. And if you head towards the top of the group in the guide section, always there, you will find all of these live streams nicely organized and categorized so you can find them really easily and you don't have to scroll through our group forever to find them. So I'm just going to check in here. For those of you who are with me live, say hello, tell me where you are. Same for those of you who are watching on the replay. I'd love to know where you all are from, where you're residing in. I am in northeastern Arizona, and the weather is definitely changing. So it's starting to get real cold. And it actually does get cold in Arizona. Sometimes people can't believe that. Okay, so let's get started. I am going to check the comments when we are done going through this kind of educational webinar that I'm sharing with you guys today, or this live stream. But I'll come back to the comments and I'll check on any questions that you guys have, and I'll be sure to answer them. So if you think of a question, just go ahead and pop it in the comments. Again, whether you're live or on the replay. Okay, let me share my screen with you. And let's get this up. And let's enter here. And let's do that. Okay. So here we go. We've got a human body here showing us some of the anatomy. And I want you all to remember that when we consume food, right, it comes to our mouth. And in our mouth, we actually begin producing something called salivary amylase. And amylase is an enzyme that's also secreted by the pancreas as well. But we get some of the salivary amylase to start breaking down those carbohydrates, sugars, starches in our food. And then once that's added to it, and hopefully we've chewed our food really well, it travels down the esophagus and then it heads into the stomach. Let's see here. For some reason, my slide is not, there it is. Okay. All right. So we head from the esophagus into the stomach, and the food comes in, and now it's here. So it's got to break down some more. So one of the major jobs of the stomach is hydrochloric acid is what is produced. And the way that stomach acid gets produced is by us being in a really relaxed state and allowing our brain and our vagal nerve and everything to really alert all of these digestive organs, including obviously the stomach, to start secreting these digestive juices. So in the stomach, it starts signaling the stomach, hey, you've got food coming down, like start percolating that hydrochloric acid. Now, that hydrochloric acid is really important for digesting our food. But one of the things to remember is that when we're at rest, when we're not consuming food, our pH in our stomach is between 3 to 3.5. Now, when we are going to digest food, we need that acid to go down even lower to 1.5 to 2.2 pH. So it's a pretty big jump. And if you think about water, water is at about 7.0 pH. So it's a pretty huge difference that we're talking about. And sometimes people think, oh, well, going from 3 to 3.5 to 1.5 to 2.2 is not like a huge jump like it would be from water, but it actually is because it's very energy demanding on the body. So that's why it's very important for us to have really good eating hygiene, breathing, being present, chewing, slowing down, tasting the food, smelling the food, all of that, so that we can secrete enough stomach acid to break down these foods. So that's, a really big, important component of the stomach, and of hydrochloric acid, but it also sterilizes our food. It kills off bacteria. It really helps to keep H. pylori in check. It breaks down our proteins effectively. It releases something called intrinsic factor, which helps to absorb our vitamin B12. And it also helps to chelate minerals like iron, zinc, magnesium, calcium, which, as you guys all know, are some of the biggest deficiencies that we see in our society, and probably you know that you have yourself. So getting the vast majority of absorption of those nutrients is getting your stomach acid right. Because without that stomach acid hitting that low enough pH, you won't actually be able to release intrinsic factor. You won't actually be able to absorb those vital nutrients for your body. You won't be able to kill off unwanted bacteria or keep H. pylori in check, or obviously break down your proteins. Now, the other element that's really important to remember is that when the hydrochloric acid gets low enough in the stomach, it actually opens up this lower sphincter here. And when that happens, then the food can then move through. So let me take you guys over here, right? So imagine there's food in here. We got our pH low enough. Everything's working nice and healthy. Then this will open, and then the food will start to move into the small intestine for the next stages of digestion. Now, here's the problem. Most people are actually not producing enough stomach acid. So when you cannot get your pH low enough, it causes the food to sit here in the stomach, and it starts to create a gas. And that gas actually opens the esophageal sphincter. This one will stay closed. The food is sitting here, gas is coming up, and now the esophageal sphincter is open, and now the little bit of acid that you have in your stomach could be splashing up into the esophagus. So those of you who have reflux or who have been taking antacids or proton pump inhibitors or anything to prevent acid production, you're actually doing yourself a huge disservice, because your actual problem is that your stomach acid is too low. So there is an intelligent way about going about this. If you have H. pylori, if you have ulcers, et cetera, but this is the big picture teaching that I really want you to take away with and really understand. So it's not because you're producing too much acid. It's because you're producing too little acid. Because if you were producing enough acid, this lower sphincter would open and your food would move right through. There wouldn't be this gas production, and the sphincter would stay intact. Now, another thing to remember is that when you overeat, this esophageal sphincter also can get stretched out, and that can be another possible cause as to why the acid may be splashing up a bit as well. Okay, so some things to remember. Now, just a little reminder, you could be having very classical picture of reflux issues, like the burning, you know, in your chest or in your throat, inflammation in the stomach, etc. But you could also be having something called silent reflux, where it's just like you're clearing your throat, or you feel like a tightness underneath your breastbone by your heart. You might be mistaking this for a heart attack, and it's not. So all of this has to do with stomach acid, not having enough stomach acid. So a couple things that you can utilize is obviously making sure your H. pylori is in balance, which is a stomach bacteria that we have present in our stomach. Naturally, we have some presence of it, but when it gets out of balance, that's when it becomes problematic. And actually, hydrochloric acid keeps this H. pylori in check. So taking care of that is really important. But you can also be using things like apple cider vinegar, and then obviously digestive enzymes with hydrochloric acid, and doing a hydrochloric acid challenge if it's safe enough for you to do that. Okay, so we've established that the food moves through when we've got a healthy functioning stomach and we've got enough acid. This sphincter opens and the food moves through into the small intestine. And now the orchestra is going to take place, where our food is going to begin moving into the small intestine, and it's going to start receiving bile from the liver and gallbladder, as well as pancreatic enzymes and sodium bicarbonate from the pancreas. So you guys can see here, here's our mouth, our esophagus, our stomach, and then it moves through. And it's a little confusing to see in this picture. Honestly, I was looking for a really good one for y'all, but I wasn't finding one that was going to be so great. But here's your liver, your gallbladder, your pancreas, and then you see these like little green lines. These are like your biliary ducts. And this is what allows like bile and enzymes from the pancreas and sodium bicarbonate to go into the small intestine and kind of do their orchestration of levels that need to take place. So I'll help make that more sense in just a moment. Okay, so when we have the liver right here, right? The liver is the one that is constantly producing bile, and the gallbladder actually stores the bile from the liver. So bile is really a liquid and a fluid, and it should flow freely when healthy. And bile, it emulsifies or breaks down fat. It keeps the small intestine healthy by keeping it alkaline and antimicrobial, which I'll explain in a moment. And it escorts toxins that have been deactivated by the liver. So the reason it's alkaline, bile, is because the small intestine is actually an alkaline environment. So imagine this bolus or this digesting food in the stomach. It goes from the super acid environment, and now it needs something to help kind of make it so that it's not going to burn the next stage, which is the small intestine, and that's bile. Bile is the one that alkalizes that food that's digesting, or the bolus, into the small intestine so it doesn't damage the lining of the small intestine. Oh, pretty cool. So each environment from the stomach to the small intestine is set up to kill off harmful pathogens that either can't survive in acidic or an alkaline environment, right? So if a bacteria survives the stomach, then hopefully it won't survive in the small intestine, because that's an alkaline environment, right? Because everything responds differently to different things. So we have these backup systems in place in our body. Bile is also a way to get rid of waste, particularly large waste products like toxins. Smaller waste products or toxins can be released through respiration, urination, or perspiration. But larger toxic molecules we want to get rid of through our feces, so through our poop, right? So bile is actually a carrier of these larger molecules through our feces. So it's pretty cool what it can do for us as far as helping along with detoxification. Now, a lot of people are super sluggish in their bile. And instead of it being real liquidy and fluid, like this golden liquid, if you will, it actually becomes really thick. So we have something called bile salts and cholesterol. And we have to have a proper ratio of these two to allow it to flow smoothly. So basically these two mix together to create bile, and that's what allows it to be fluid. So when that ratio is off and a person has too much cholesterol versus, enough salt of the bile salts to be added to that mixture, oftentimes these people will struggle with blood sugar issues, high estrogen or estrogen dominance, hypothyroidism, and many others. And that is because of a higher ratio of cholesterol to salt, and that will make the bile really slow and sluggish, and it doesn't move properly. And then the liver produces both of the cholesterol and the bile salts. So if you ever wondered, if your cholesterol numbers are not so great, why that's the case, it's because you actually have a sluggish liver. If you've ever wondered why you have thyroid issues, it's because your thyroid, your T3 to T4 is converted right there in your liver. So if your liver is sluggish, it's not going to be able to perform properly for all these different functions of your body. And the big really reason is because of poor bile flow. Now, also, if you have inflammation in your liver and you've got like these bile ducts or these biliary trees or your gallbladder, which could be coming from bad diet, chemical exposure, infections, inflammation, all of those things will damage the bile ducts and also create a scarring. And that scarring will prevent the bile from being able to flow through the ducts and carry it between these organs to the small intestine, right? So everything just kind of gets clogged, and it's not a good scenario. So I want to ask you guys, have any of you had your gallbladder removed? Have you ever had gallstones? Have you had any stones? Tell me in the comments, yes, if you have. If you've ever seen stones in a scan, let me know. This is always super eye-opening. Okay, so most stones actually don't show up on a scan. So if they show up on a scan, that means they're big enough for the scan to pick up, okay? So if you're seeing a stone on a scan, then that means you probably have, honestly, thousands of smaller ones that are not being detected. So why am I talking about stones and the gallbladder? Well, it's because of this. Because these stones are actually created from cholesterol, which is your bile. So when your bile gets sluggish, it turns into stones. It is not a good situation, okay? There's all different shades of like greens to browns to blacks, almost like slightly blue. They can be really tiny. They can be really big. These were actually, obviously pulled out of the gallbladder as well as those other pictures I just showed you. And this is a cut up open gallbladder with all these gallstones in it. I mean, it doesn't even look real, right? It's like, can I even believe this is happening? But it is. So we need to make sure that we've got proper acid production, proper bile flow. Can you see why? You do not want this going on. So if you've had like a gallbladder attack, this is why. It's actually because you've got poor bile flow. So remember, your liver is the one that is constantly producing the bile, and the gallbladder is the one that's storing it. And your gallbladder, if you've had it removed, you're still producing bile, but now it's at a small drip. And what do I mean by that? And it's because your gallbladder actually helps you be really accurate when to use bile, how much of it to use, especially if you're consuming a really good solid meal with some healthy fats and proteins, for example, right? So when you don't have that, and then you eat a really solid meal and you've just got this drip coming right from the liver of this bile, and you don't have a storage tank of the gallbladder anymore, it's a little harder to get that mixture. I don't want you to get down, because it's possible to help that doing some very particular things, like making sure you get your bile flowing. But that is part and parcel part of the issue. So if you still have your gallbladder and you're having all these issues, this is your number one culprit. So not only can you experience GI issues from poor liver and gallbladder and bile flow, but you can also be experiencing pain or issues in your upper back, in your right shoulder, or in your IT band because of bile flow issues. And you haven't had like a physical injury or trauma that you can link it to. So if you've got any pain in those areas and you're like, what gives? And you've got all this gallbladder, liver issue, then it's your bile. So some things that can support good bile flow is taking digestive bitters. It's eating bitter foods like parsley and cilantro, milk thistle, dandelion, radishes, artichokes, even herbal teas like ginger and licorice root tea, even bile salts, which is often called tudka, taurine or choline. These are all good things for bile flow. And also the very humble coffee enema, which someday I'll do a live stream about if you guys want to hear about that. All right, let's move right along. I'm sure you guys just loved looking at those pictures of gallstones. It's a great way to get my children to really chew their food well. All right, so now we're going to move along to the pancreas. So here is the pancreas. It's this oblong organ. It's located behind the stomach in the upper left abdomen area. And it's responsible for converting food to fuel. It produces hormones that regulate blood sugar like insulin, and it produces enzymes to aid in the digestion of proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. So the pancreas is the major organ involved also in diabetes, but also blood sugar imbalance. When the pancreas becomes irritated and inflamed, it results in pancreatitis as the enzymes leak out and damage the surrounding tissue. And diseases like pancreatitis and pancreatic cancer impact the body's ability to digest food and absorb nutrients. So super important, right? And the other thing is that, right, the pancreas is really, it's putting out also sodium bicarbonate as well. Now, these digestive enzymes that the pancreas puts out are lipase, protease, and amylase. So lipase is the one that helps break down your fats. And you need to have enough of it also in order to take on and absorb fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, E, and K. And if you have poor fat absorption, you're going to probably have symptoms like diarrhea and fatty bowel movements. And that's like where your stools float. The other enzyme that the pancreas secretes is protease. And this one is the one that breaks down protein. And it helps protect you also from germs that might live in your intestines, right? So we have all these like backup systems, as long as everything's working properly, to take care of pathogenic bacteria. Amylase breaks down your starches, your carbohydrates, and your sugars so that your body can use it for energy. And if you don't have enough of amylase, you'll also see some diarrhea as well as undigested carbohydrates. And your carbohydrates could even be including your vegetables. So if you see food in your stool, this is probably because you're not secreting enough amylase enzyme, amongst other things, right? So some of the hormones that the pancreas secretes obviously is insulin. That's the big one that we all know about, right? And that's the hormone that helps your body use sugar for energy. And without enough of it, your sugar levels rise in your blood and you could develop diabetes, or maybe you have developed diabetes. And, you know, the other thing to remember is that a chronic stress response coming from the brain that hasn't been signaled to shut off. Naturally, when we secrete stress hormone cortisol in the body, one of its telltale characteristics is that you release insulin into the body because you're trying to run from the tiger. But nowadays we don't run from the tiger anymore. It's all modern day lifestyle or toxins or stressors, etc. So that could be one of the reasons that you're caught in a diabetes vicious circle or a blood sugar imbalance that you can't figure out, even though you've changed your diet and you've done some really good dietary things. Your brain and your brain signaling is off. And so that needs to be helped and considered. The second hormone is glucagon. So if your blood sugar gets too low, glucagon helps raise it by sending a message to your liver to release stored sugar. And then the last one is gastrin and amylin. So gastrin stimulates your stomach to make gastric acid. So it's actually helping us with our stomach acid, right? And amylin helps control appetite and stomach emptying. So pretty awesome what the body can do. And then, you know, we've got a lot of different other processes, but let's just say we get towards the end of the large intestine. And the large intestine is where we have the most activity between 6 to 9 in the morning. So we're getting ready to take a poop. And so you really want to make sure you're having at least one good bowel movement between those hours of 6 to 9, even if you want to, would be great as well. And what that does is it just kind of sweeps the intestine, right? It gets off out of your intestine any obviously lingering stool that's hanging around, any microbial load, takes the stress off of your system. It moves out bile and toxins, and it just gets everything flowing so much better. So that's why those of you who are struggling with constipation, particularly, this can be really, really difficult. So drinking a warm beverage in the early morning can really help with those bowel movements to get that 6 to 9 period and get that activity and that peristalsis, but also really aiming to get at least 1 to 2 more bowel movements a day. So we're looking at ideally 3 to 4 formed stools during the day to keep all of this really clean, healthy, moving efficiently, flowing freely, and all of that. So let me stop sharing here and get my video going. And let's see what's happening here. All right. So I'm just popping on here for a moment. I'm just going to reload the page. I'm hoping you all are finding this super helpful. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the comments and I will be happy to address them. Something didn't make sense, or you have questions about what's going on based off of what you're learning in this. I'm happy to answer those questions. So I hope you all found it helpful. I'm looking in the comments. Do I have any questions here, gang? Let me know. And for those of you who don't know, I offer a really something special that I don't offer anywhere else inside of this group. And that is running a GI map test. And that will actually show us a lot of what is going on in your whole digestive system. It'll tell us how you're doing with fending off all kinds of pathogens, from bacteria to viruses to funguses to worms, parasites, etc., as well as how your immune system is secreting in your gut, how those digestive enzymes are going, you know, how the liver is functioning, all that. We really get a great picture in the GI map, and I meet up with you personally on Zoom, and I share with you what it is that I'm seeing. I analyze it for you and help correlate it with what you have going on so that you can understand what the heck is happening inside of your body and why you're not feeling well, and then get down to the bottom of it. Okay, I don't see any questions. Oh, here we go. Sandra says, how to naturally remove any H. pylori or parasites from the intestines. Okay. So with H. pylori, you have many options. The first is obviously really making sure that you address food sensitivities. So you've got to get those intact. And then you can use different things like Matula tea, you can use mastic gum. Just knowing dosing, knowing how long to use them for is really critical. But I always tell people this because it's so important. If you're just working on one piece, like you're like, I've got H. pylori and now I'm just going to use this one thing. And I'm not going to change the way I'm eating. I'm not going to change all the other stressors, the kind of water I'm drinking, the type of supplements I'm using, other kinds of supplements, etc. If you don't change all of the factors, it can be hard to remove these things that you've got going on in your body. Does that make sense, Sandra? For at least that piece. And then, so you want to make sure you're addressing it long enough. And then once you address it, then you really want to retest immediately and see what's going on. What test are you using to detect your H. pylori, Sandra? Now, parasites are kind of like a whole nother animal. And with parasites, hi, Jim. With parasites, you have to realize that parasites, there's a mother parasite, and then there's babies. And these babies like to live inside our cells. So mama parasites are extremely intelligent because they deposit their offspring inside of our cells. And they kind of trap their babies in there because they don't want to share what they're feeding off of inside of your body. The breath test. Okay. All right. I'll talk about that in just a second, Sandra. So, it's kind of a crazy thing, think about it, like this mama parasite. So what we have to do with parasites is really create a good timing for when parasites want to procreate. And that's actually during the full moon cycle. So you have to really have good preparatory action, make sure the body is fully draining and detoxifying, that the liver and the gallbladder and the intestines are working efficiently, and that you're pooping well, those at least once a day, but honestly 2 to 3 times a day, so that everything is moving, so that when it's time to go and kill off the parasites, you can be able to evacuate essentially these dead bodies well. And if the mama decides that she needs to defend herself, she will trigger those babies to come out of the cells. And you kind of want that, but you want it in a right kind of timing, and you need to be able to evacuate it quick enough so it doesn't make you ill. Because all of these pathogens, for the most part, give off something called endotoxins. And endotoxins are really what make us sick. They're like lipopolysaccharides. I don't know if you've heard of that, Sandra. Let me know. So, there's a lot of different things that you can use for parasite cleansing. I have a very particular set of things that I like to use. They cross the blood-brain barrier because oftentimes a lot of supplements, when they hit the stomach acid inside of the stomach, they kind of get destroyed and pulverized. And so I really like using something that crosses the blood-brain barrier and is not affected by that stomach acid, so it can pass through and actually make a dent. Okay. Now, parasite cleansing, depending on how bad you've got it, you may need to go through several trials of this. Okay. And if you've got a lot of different pathogens going on, then you really want to take this kind of in an order, a sequential order. If you try to do everything in a big bang, you're going to get a big bang and you're not going to feel so good. So even with doing it in a sequential order, sometimes it's not so great either. You know, you get a lot of bad die-off, and sometimes the body cannot tolerate it because it's very toxic. So I would say first address the H. pylori. Now, as far as the breath test is concerned, Sandra, I don't particularly like using the breath test for H. pylori. I just don't. I like using the stool test. And because it's going to show me your healthy levels, and then I'm also going to know when it's out of balance. Have you ever done a stool test for H. pylori? Let me know. Jim, I hope it's not freezing up on you anymore. I'm getting the impression from Sandra that, Sandra, am I freezing up for you? And no, you have not done a stool test for H. pylori. Okay. This breath test that you've done, Sandra, is it also checking for SIBO? Is it a mixture? Yeah, Jim, it seems like it's not freezing up for her, so it might be your internet. Okay, good. All right. I see. So it's a mixture with SIBO and H. pylori together. Okay. Yeah, I like using the stool test, but you know, I tell you, there are people that they could run the breath test, they could run the stool test, and no H. pylori would show up, but they're having a ton of the symptomologies that would be associated with this. And so sometimes, I always say this, I don't know if you've heard me say this before, but you know, no lab test is perfect. We try to pick the best ones. I try to use the ones that, you know, I work with a lot of people. And so I kind of keep my finger on the pulse, and I'm seeing what's working and what I'm seeing and where I'm getting really good results. And so that's where I lean, you know what I mean? But sometimes those tests don't pick up everything. And if they don't, then we still sometimes need to take action, you know? Sandra, did I answer your questions? Do you have need any clarification? Is there anything you wanted to ask? Jim, is there anything you wanted to ask as well? And let me know if you guys found the digestive anatomy kind of teaching helpful. I see. Yeah, you know, I mean, there is a place for pharmaceuticals, but if you're not responding well to it, yes, I did cover the pancreas, Jim. No problem. If you're not responding to it well, it's because it's being kind of used like a magic bullet. You know what I mean? And your body does not tolerate it well. And so you need to go back. You need to really look at all the underlying causes. You need to get all the pieces to the puzzle, work on them all together. And I would definitely suggest using more of a natural and a holistic protocol to address it. Because if your body's not tolerating it, it is not responding to it, that means there's some underlying causes that need to be addressed that haven't been addressed. Does that make sense? And you're not unnormal, Sandra. This happens a lot to a lot of people. That's usually why you're here in the group with me. So this is some of what I help people work through. Okay, let me know. Is there anything else that you guys want to ask? And how was the digestive anatomy lesson for Jim and Sandra, for those of you here live and those of you on the replay? Please let me know. Did you learn anything new? Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. If any of you have any other questions, please feel free to stick them down there in the comments and I will happily answer them. If you are ready to really get my help and you're ready to resolve these chronic digestive issues that you've got going on, then you're welcome to comment here. You're welcome to DM me, and I'll stick my scheduling link here in the comments as well. And until then, I will see you all next week at this same time and place, Thursday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And I look forward to it. I hope you all have a great rest of your week and your weekend. And I will see you soon. Bye-bye.